There have been days of fury from fans over plans for 6 English clubs to join a new European Super League where they would play other top European sides without the need to qualify.
Manchester City, one of the first to walk away, and Chelsea, of course. We're joined now by Crystal Palace Chairman Steve Parish. Morning, Steve.
Morning.
Was this fan power which eventually defeated the European Super League? And if so, why are the owners of the top 6 clubs so out of touch with what their supporters feel about the game?
Well, it certainly was the fans. I mean, the fans really fought for the right to lose yesterday. You know, they said that they don't want victory without the jeopardy and the risk of losing, that it's meaningless to them. And they don't want to be part of a gilded elite with no relegation and no promotion. So absolutely, the fans, the players, the managers that came out against it, all of them must deserve high praise. You know, we have to remember that these things were dreamed up by people, not by football clubs. What we've got to do now is try and start a healing process and find a way forward.
Where do we go from now, though? There's going to be a lot of bad blood, isn't it? I can't think of those. Well, I can imagine what it's going to be like when the fans return to the stadiums and how they might react to some of their owners and what we might see in terms of dissent and chants from the terraces. Where do you see this going?
Well, what I think we need to see from 6, instead of, you know, some hollow kind of tweets, I mean, at least one of them had the good grace to apologise. The rest of them seem to indicate they've been invited to a party and now they decided and thought better of it. But it was their party, their guest list. I mean, this was an attempted coup of football. And what we need to see now, I'll really believe they're sorry when they go to UEFA and they row back on all of the things that they banked last week before they did this. So I don't want to hear any more about coefficients and special voting rights and selective history of distributions of money based on the last 3 years' performance in the Champions League. What we need now is for Mr. Shephard to really stand up to these guys, to face them down and say, right, you've played your card that you've threatened us with for the last 10 years. It's failed. Now I'm going to look after the good of the game. And I'm not going to see Ajax and Warsaw qualifying in the summer while the 7th place team in the Premier League leapfrogs the 5th place team. So, you know, hopefully this is a catalyst for real change now. And it's a massive victory for the fans. And I'm very pleased to see it.
And what do you think, Steve, is going to happen to those 6 clubs within the Premier League? Because obviously it's not just bad blood between the fans and the clubs. Is there bad blood between the clubs? You've said it's people, not clubs. Will those clubs be punished for what they did, or are they just welcomed back into the fold?
Well, look, I think that we can make knee-jerk punishments. Or we can really get under the skin of this and make sure that we affect real change. You know, look, some of these guys are very agreeable. You know, you would count them as, if not friends, certainly, you know, valued acquaintances. And it is going to be difficult because, you know, we've been patronised, we've been lied to, and we've frankly been deceived all along the way. So there does need to be more contrition from them. But the most important thing is that they see the error of their ways and they start to guide their clubs as custodians of the clubs, recognising that the game is run by the fans, for the fans, by the players. And as soon as they realise that, we can get back to the real business of winning and losing on a Saturday afternoon.
And we're going to speak to Oliver Dowden, the Culture and Sports Secretary, in a couple of minutes. The government has ordered this fan-led review of how football operates. As the chairman of a Premier League football club, what do you make of fans having more of a say?
Well, look, the fans have a fantastic say in the game in this country, and indeed it looks like across Europe, but none more so here. You know, we would be open to any ideas. I think, you know, the government said yesterday that they would drop a legislative bomb on this idea, which was also hugely helpful. So, you know, look, the big 6, as they like to be known, and I hope we see an end to that term as well, have invited this in. And, you know, we're going to have to deal with it and look at it. And if there are good ideas that come forward, embrace them.
All right, Steve Parish, thank you very much indeed, Chair of Crystal Palace Football Club. Joining us now, former Chelsea player Pat Nevin, former Liverpool player John Barnes. Good morning to you both. Pat Nevin, you must be particularly proud of the fans of your former club.
You know, I was on the tube going to the game last night and got off the tube and with a lot of other fans And there were mostly Chelsea fans, but there was other fans as well from lots of different clubs that were making a big noise there. They were making their voices heard of, not just football fans from Chelsea, but football fans from everywhere. And actually anyone who cares about the game, who knew this was the daftest idea they'd ever had. But they stood up to it, and just as Steve Parish was saying there, all the people from the players, from the managers, Pep Guardiola spoke very well yesterday as well. But everyone who was asked about it said the right things and made it clear that the reputational damage that was being done to these clubs was something they just could not countenance. So well done the Chelsea fans, but well done the country and well done our communities of football.
Yeah. John, it's certainly been a backlash that, you know, they perhaps didn't see coming, or perhaps they did. I mean, what was their end game here, do you think? Do you think this was about the Super League, or is there something else at play? Is it them trying to negotiate a better, more favourable deal with UEFA when it comes to the Champions League?
I do think it was a bit of a tactical ploy to try and get a better deal. But this started in 1992, when the Premier League decided to break away from the Football League because a group of people, Liverpool included, Manchester United, Arsenal, and of course the whole of the Premier League teams, Crystal Palace, decided that they wanted more than everybody else. This is an extension of that. And as much as we're talking about it is not right because it's a top 6, the top 15 in the Premier League started this in 92. And ever since then, we've been asking for multi-billionaire businessmen to get involved in football so that we can actually grow this disproportionate wealth further away from the Championship, the League One and League Two. And this was just an extension of that. And this was a power battle between two elite groups who want to control and exploit football. Nothing to do with the fans. The fans will have to pay a lot of money. They can't go to the games. They have to pay for shirts. So as much as we're now framing it that this is a victory for the fans, this is a victory for the status quo of the people in power still exploiting football.
Yeah, but you talk about these billionaire clubs, but it has brought amazing players. Some of the best players in the world now play in the Premier League. I mean, the Man City story is a prime example. It wasn't one of the big clubs, but huge investment from a foreign owner has turned it potentially into the biggest club in the world. And
that's why we can't have it both ways.
Yeah, exactly.
We can't ask for these billionaires to get involved, to give us their money, but do what we say. They're talking about us. They're talking about us understanding the business, understanding the nature of football. It's more football understanding the nature of business. That's how they got to be billionaires, because they do what they want based on finance, not based on anything else.
But sorry, Susanna, go on.
No, I was going to say, what do you make then of the fan-led review, John? I mean, you know, in Germany, fans have a much bigger say in the running of their football clubs. But how do billionaires respond to that?
Well, because they have shares in the clubs.
Yep.
We don't. We don't. Now, if fans want to let the fans buy the clubs, and of course, in 2021, it's impossible for fans to buy clubs, whereas in Germany, they own these shares for many, many years, so they're accountable. And as far as this fan-led review goes, we had a review onto the Commission of Racial Disparities in England, and we saw what the outcome of that review was. So I don't believe in reviews.
Pat, where do you see the future now, this relationship, this key relationship between the owners and the fans? There is bad blood. Can you see this sort of... Is there any positive to come out of this?
The positives is they've been put slightly back in their place, some of the owners, and they understand what the culture of our football clubs is. I think some of them didn't know. Well, they know now that if they try and mess with that again, they'll probably get another bloody nose again. So I'm kind of happy about that. There's a positive about that. Football clubs do make mistakes, as long as you're quick to own up to those mistakes. And the damage that's been done is to those individuals and those at the tops of clubs that have made this mistake. But I know what football's like. It moves on. You know, you win a couple of games, you win a trophy, you win a championship. It moves on and everyone's happy again. The positive that comes out of it is the next time this group of people try and flex their muscles and push down, like Steve Parish was saying at the start there and Digger's saying just now, do you know what? Some of that power's gone. And that's a good thing that some of that power's gone, because they wanted to take complete control and they're not the right people to have control, because they will only take care of their own interests. It needs to be an upper body that does that. You know, I'm not the biggest fan of UEFA all the time, or indeed FIFA. However, in this occasion, they're the ones that have to have more control. It's not the tail wagging the dog for once.
OK, thanks, Pat.
Pat, Nevin, thanks very much indeed. John Barnes, sorry, I just want to pick up on something that you mentioned about government reviews. You said you didn't like the outcome of the review into racial disparities. Just explain what you mean by that.
Well, of course, when you have official reviews, you can't argue with them, particularly when you put on this particular you form a committee for the racial disparity, and there is Dr. Tony Sewell, who's black, running a review. So therefore, as a black person, we can't complain when the review comes out. But unfortunately, the review has said that there's no systemic racism in England. Who knew? Wow. So therefore, that is now solidified in people's minds. Whereas in Joe Biden, he has just come out today and said about the systemic racism in America. But we assume in England that there's no systemic racism because the review said there was no systemic racism. That is why I'm very loath to listen to what reviews, things that reviews say rather than the reality.
Do you think that's the case, that people just accepted the result of that review? Because from the reaction, it was pretty roundly rejected.
Who by? Because I know a lot of people, I know a lot of white people who are happy with that review because they don't want to believe that there's systemic racism. And now that a review has come out, and it's actually come out with a lot of black people saying this, of course a lot of white people are going to think, well, they're playing the race card, they're making excuses. The review went further to then state that class plays a bigger part in terms of people's ability to improve their lot and disparities than race. So of course you then have the working class on side now saying that we're worse off than black people. So that is why when people talk about reviews and official reviews by committees, I am a little bit cynical.
Yeah. Now, the other news overnight, John, the verdict of the George Floyd case and Derek Chauvin will face many, many years in prison. We'll find out in 8 weeks' time exactly how long he will face. Finally, there's been justice, not just for George Floyd, his family, but for the whole of America. And as you say, the president has come out and said, we have got a problem with systemic racism. Here in the UK, what can we learn? We look to America in so many ways for so many other things. They often say that America leads and Britain will follow. What can Britain learn? What can we all learn from the news overnight from Minneapolis?
Well, first of all, I think that many people see racism in many different ways. And I think it's depending on the individual's interpretation of racism, which then says whether we believe it exists or not. Now, of course, because in England, we don't have policemen shooting black people regularly, so therefore we assume it doesn't exist. But then we have a situation where Meghan Markle has left the UK to go back to America because she feels racism is worse here from a media perspective, whereas here we are convinced that racism is worse in America. So, of course, the dynamic between racism and the types of racism may be different, but the essence of discrimination is exactly the same. How many black millionaires do they have? How many black people in business, in government, in America? We don't have that here, but we're not being killed by the police. So society may tell us that we're better off here than in America. And American society will say they're better off in America. So once again, it depends on which way you want to frame it. Very much like this whole football situation. You know, whether it's going to be the ESL or whether it's going to be Sky or whether it's going to be the Premier League, it's about exploitation of working classes and the average football fan. Who is exploiting them? It's not going to be the ESL, but it'll be UEFA and it'll be FIFA.
Yeah, it's, you're absolutely right. And I think, you touched on there about the report about classes, and I think there is clearly an issue in this country of both class and race, but I think the fundamental thing is that if you're working class and black, you're worse off, and that's the fundamental point. I think there is an issue where people are being pitted against each other. But
if you're working class, black and female, because, of course, there's a gender issue of females being disenfranchised. And in this report, this report didn't even mention the gender disparity, the discrepancies and disparity in gender. So what happens is we have not in 1,000 years even attempted to discuss the disparity between classes in terms of the working class needing more. Now, black people and women are now relegated to below that. So if it's taken 1,000 years for us to look at class and black people and women are below that, when are we going to get to talking about the discrimination against black people and women? From the committee's point of view.
Yep. Well, you make excellent points, John Barnes. We'll put some of them to Oliver Dowden.